Hi everybody, welcome back to our discussion of Chapter 10. This video is a continuation of the bonds payable exercise we began in the previous video lecture. You will need either the PDF version of the worksheet or the Excel workbook that you started in the previous lecture. If you do not have it, please download and print the PDF worksheet or download the Excel workbook and go back to video lecture 10-2 so you can catch up before continuing with this video. Let's talk about bonds issued at a discount. Example: on June 30th, X1, ABC Company issued an 8% 3-year bond with a par value of $250,000 and semi-annual interest payments. On the issue date, the annual market rate of interest for these bonds is 10%, which implies a selling price of $94.92. Let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, the par value of the bond is $250,000. The bond's annual contract interest rate is 8%. It's a 3-year bond. We're going to be making semi-annual interest payments, which means we will pay the interest twice a year. And there is a difference between the market rate of interest and the contract rate of interest at the bond issue date. The market rate of interest at date of issuance is 10%, but we're only paying 8% interest. Therefore, the issue price of the bond is going to have to be adjusted downwards to equalize the yield between the 8% we're willing to pay and 10% market rate of interest. So let's go through these questions, and I think a lot of that will become clear as we work through the rest of this worksheet. The first question says, to calculate the cash to be received upon issuance. Well, we're not issuing this bond at par. We are not going to receive $250,000. We're issuing the bond at a discount, which means the cash we're going to receive is less than $250,000. As a matter of fact, you're given how much cash we're going to receive by the selling price of $94.92, which means that the cash we're going to receive is 94.92% of the par value. So the cash received upon issuance of this bond is $237,300. That's the par value times 94.92%. Now we need to write a journal entry to record the issuance of the bond. So if we receive $237,300 of cash, we're going to debit cash for that amount. And we do have the obligation to repay the par value to our bondholders at the maturity date. So we have to credit bonds payable $250,000, but wait a minute, this journal entry is not in balance. We need to debit something for the difference between $237,300 of cash we received and our liability of $250,000. The difference between the cash received and the liability is $12,700 in this example, and we're going to debit a contra liability account called discounts on bonds payable. So the journal entry is debit cash for $237,300, debit discounts on bonds payable $12,700, and credit bonds payable $250,000. The next point, using the straight line amortization method, how much of the bond discount will be amortized to interest expense on each semi-annual interest payment date? Well, we have to determine how many semi-annual interest payments there will be. It's a 3-year bond. Interest is paid twice a year. Therefore, 3 years times twice a year, or 3 times 2, is 6 semi-annual interest payments. The discount on bonds payable when the bond was issued had a debit balance of $12,700. If we divide that by 6, the number of semi-annual interest payments, that will calculate the amount of the bond discount that will be amortized to interest expense on each semi-annual interest payment date. 12,700 divided by 6 equals $2,116.67. Don't be mystified. You'll see how this all comes together as soon as we finish this example. The next, number 4, says calculate the amount of each semi-annual bond interest payment. And remember, we talked about in the prior video, always the amount of the bond interest payment is the par value times 1/2 of the contract interest rate. The par value is $250,000. The annual contract interest rate is 8%. Therefore, to calculate our semi-annual bond interest payment, we'll take the $250,000 par value and multiply it times 4% to equal $10,000. Par value times 1/2 of the contract interest rate will equal the semi-annual bond interest payment. When bonds are issued at par, the bond interest expense is the same as the calculated amount of the interest that has to be paid. But when bonds are issued at a discount, then the bond interest expense is not only the amount that has to be paid, but it has to be adjusted by a piece of the bond discount. So let's work through that. I know that can sound a little confusing right now, but let's work through how to calculate the semi-annual bond interest expense. I have 3 different methods to calculate the same number. And let's see if it makes more sense when we finish these calculations. The first method is that we will calculate the total bond interest expense that will be recognized over the life of the bonds, and then we will divide that by the number of semi-annual payments. 2 ways to calculate this. The first method is to imply how much interest is included in the difference between the amount that will ultimately be repaid and the amount that we got from bondholders today. And let me simplify that and say, if I pay you $3 and I borrowed from you $2.50, can we agree that the difference between the amount I gave you, $3, and the $2.50 that I borrowed from you, that 50 cents is interest? And that's what this is doing. It's going to take the amount that we ultimately have to give back to the bondholders, and subtract from that the amount that we actually borrowed from the bondholders, and the difference will be the interest over the life of the bonds. Let me put the math down. We'll talk about it a little bit more. So we borrowed money from our bondholders, and we're going to have to repay them 6 interest payments of $10,000 each. We already calculated that up above. We're also going to have to pay back at maturity date the full par value of the bond, $250,000. So the full amount that we're going to have to give back to our bondholders is $310,000. The amount we received from the bondholders, remember it was issued at a discount, so we only received $237,300 in cash. If we subtract that, it means that the total bond interest expense that is going to be paid over the life of the bonds is $72,700. Therefore, the semi-annual bond interest expense on a straight line basis is $72,700 divided by the 6 payments we have to make, or $12,116.67. Let's do an alternative calculation of the very same thing, just a different way of thinking about it. The 6 interest payments of $10,000 each, $60,000 of interest that we will pay, plus the amount of the discount when we issued the bond. Remember, we had a $12,700 discount. Take the interest that we actually have to pay at the discount, and that's the bond interest expense. $72,700. If we divide that by 6, we calculate the very same semi-annual bond interest expense of $12,116.67. And there's one more way I want to show you, and I think it's the easiest way to calculate the semi-annual bond interest expense for a bond issued at a discount. We're going to take the semi-annual bond interest payment of $10,000 and add to that a piece of the discount. And as the bond is amortized on the straight line basis, we already calculated the piece of the discount. $12,700 divided by 6 payments is $2,116.67. So let's put those numbers together and see what we come up with. One semi-annual bond interest payment is $10,000. 1/6 of the discount, as calculated above, is $2,116.67. When you add those two amounts together, you calculate the very same bond interest expense for each payment of $12,116.67. Well, this video is getting kind of long, so I'm going to stop this video here, and when we come back, we'll pick up with number 7 on the example of bonds issued at a discount. See you next time.